You're listening to a Fashion Industry Insight segment presented by Tukatalks. In this segment, we'll be reading the Tukatech blog post titled, "The Fashion Industry's Dirty Little Secret, Product Development Waste." When we think about pollution, we usually think about fossil fuels, freeways full of cars, or the wasteful single-use plastic on every shelf of every store. The fashion industry often isn't the first or even the second or third industry that comes to mind. However, the way we think about the fashion industry has to change. It's responsible for 10% of the world's carbon emissions alone. That's more than all international flights and cargo ships combined. It's also the second largest consumer of water worldwide and is responsible for 20% of global water waste. Fashion waste has a devastating effect on our environment, and change has been long overdue. In this article, we'll discuss the impacts of fashion waste and the steps that you can take to reduce it. Fast fashion leads to fashion waste. Trends are fun to read about in the pages of fashion magazines, but their impact on the environment and contribution to the fashion industry's excessive waste is anything but fun. For centuries, people invested in several high-quality clothing items, and fashion moved at a snail's pace in comparison to the rapid trends of today. Think back to what you may know about historical fashion. Hoop skirts were in vogue for nearly the entire 18th and 19th centuries. But in the last 100 years, we've gone from the glamorous Art Deco gowns of the 1920s to crop tops and skinny jeans. Clothing has become less expensive to produce thanks to modern industrialization, and less expensive to purchase. This means that trends go out of fashion as rapidly as they come into fashion. People no longer make their own clothes or save up for tailored pieces, so they're more likely to buy trendy pieces that will last only a season. The fashion industry, in turn, capitalizes on this by turning out more and more collections per year. Fast fashion is a wasteful practice that leads to overproduction, excess greenhouse gas emissions, and extreme textile waste. Carbon emissions. Carbon emissions are commonly called greenhouse gas emissions, and curbing their production is one of the biggest focuses of environmentalists around the globe. Carbon is the building block of life, and all organic substances, including us, contain carbon. We also all emit carbon dioxide whenever we exhale or when natural things decompose. It's an essential aspect of our ecosystem. But ever since the Industrial Revolution at the turn of the 20th century, we've thrown the balance of carbon dioxide out of whack. Trees and other plant life recycle carbon dioxide into oxygen, but we've been producing so much excess CO2 while simultaneously cutting down plant life that nature can't regulate it anymore. This leads to excess greenhouse gas emissions. In 2018, the fashion industry emitted more greenhouse gases than France, the UK, and Germany combined. Surplus clothing. Some of the biggest environmental problems that the fashion industry causes can be traced back to surplus clothing production. Huge quantities of clothing are produced every day, but since trends move at a rapid pace, most of those clothes aren't sold before a new trend takes over the market. 40% of all clothes manufactured aren't sold at their original price, meaning that they weren't able to be sold and had to be discounted to make up for the surplus. That means that nearly half of all clothes produced are surplus. But what happens to the clothing that's left on the sale rack, still unsold? Clothing manufacturers have admitted to burning or destroying excess unsold stock. According to a report from 2018, designer brand Burberry burned an estimated $36 million worth of unsold clothing. And Burberry is not alone in this practice. H&M, Louis Vuitton, Nike, Cartier, Victoria's Secret, JCPenney, and more have been reported to incinerate unpurchased clothing. This incredibly wasteful practice just adds to the harmful carbon emissions that the fashion industry produces. It's even more jarring when you think that a huge amount of resources and energy went into producing those Burberry scarves or trendy graphic tees from H&M, only for them to be turned around and destroyed without ever being worn. Clothing in landfills. Companies aren't the only ones with a clothing surplus problem. Consumers do as well. Since trends come and go in the blink of an eye, what was considered the height of fashion in spring might already be outdated by fall. It's only natural to assume that all those out-of-trend clothing items get thrown out. Clothing isn't made to last anymore. Unless you're willing to pay top dollar for luxury brands, the average everyday person likely shops at fast fashion retailers like H&M, Target, and Zara. Fast fashion doesn't just refer to the ever-changing trends. Clothing from fast fashion retailers wears out quicker than ever before. Since people aren't investing in the clothing they purchase, they aren't going to get holes patched up or fix the worn-out soles of their shoes. Fast fashion clothing is meant to last as long as the trend does, not to stand the test of time. Americans throw away 16 million tons worth of textile waste every year, and an estimated 87% of all textiles in America end up in a landfill. Water waste. To create a cotton t-shirt, 400 gallons of water are consumed. And to create a single pair of blue jeans, you need to use about 1,800 gallons of water. Now imagine how much water it would take to create all of the t-shirts and jeans in a single outlet in the mall. The numbers are staggering. Water isn't just used to grow cotton, it's also used to dye fabrics. Once the clothing has been dyed, the dye-filled water is often released back into the environment with potentially harmful chemicals. Countries where there are large amounts of garment production, like India, China, and Vietnam, then have to deal with the consequences of their polluted water supply. The fashion industry is also a huge contributor to ocean pollution. Microplastics are tiny plastic fibers so small that they are practically invisible, but they will never degrade. These microplastics get into waterways whenever synthetic fabric like polyester is washed. How can the fashion industry turn the tide? The UN estimates that if the fashion industry does nothing to protect the environment, it will be responsible for 25% of the world's carbon emissions by 2050. But how can designers and manufacturers turn back the clock? Reducing product development waste. One way that designers can cut back on the amount of textile waste that they produce is by finding alternatives to physical samples and patterns. Fashion technology is constantly advancing, and one of the new technologies available to designers is virtual modeling. With a software program like Tukatalks, designers can create mock-ups and samples of their designs without having to make physical samples. Since everything is virtual, sample designs can be created, adjusted, and presented, and you don't have to put a needle to fabric until the design is finalized. With Tukatalks, the need for physical samples and prototypes that would just be tossed out is eliminated, saving hundreds of garments from the landfills. Scale production to fit the need. The fashion industry produces far more clothing items than consumers will buy, which means that waste is created not just in the production of garments, but in the destruction of them. If the fashion industry scales back its production to meet the need of consumers, fewer carbon emissions, fewer gallons of water, and fewer pollutants will be wasted on clothing that never sells. Rethink the way you cut fabrics. As anyone who knows their way around a sewing pattern will tell you, fabric scraps are a wasteful thorn in your side. This just becomes all the more prevalent when you are cutting out the fabric for hundreds or thousands of garments in factory settings. Technology like SmartMark can help cut down not just on the cost of fabric, but on the fabric you waste. It helps you make the most of each yard of fabric you have by intuitively marking pattern pieces in the most optimized way to reduce waste. Create garments that will last. One of the major pitfalls of the fashion industry is that trendy garments aren't made to survive everyday wear and tear, or even a change in the tide of trends. By focusing on designing higher quality clothing items that will not only hold up against years of regular wear, but also years of changing trends, clothing brands can help reduce clothing waste. Putting the focus on high-quality, organic, or even recycled materials and sustainable manufacturing would be a boon to both the fashion industry and the globe. So what next? While fashion waste is a huge problem, it isn't time to throw in the towel just yet. There are steps that brands can take to ensure that their manufacturing practice don't cause further harm to the earth. Thanks for listening to this Fashion Industry Insights segment. If you found this article helpful, we would love if you would share with a friend, give us a thumbs up, or rate and review on your favorite podcast platform.